All right, Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Um, I already put into the chat. It doesn't. I misspelled sponsor, but it's supposed to say sponsoring pages to go by. And it's basically what I give my sponsees when they ask what bullet points I need to hit in the book. And about 5 years ago now, or more, maybe longer ago than that, because in person, maybe 10 years ago, I started doing this one as one of the final meetings. This won't be the final meeting of this group, but I've we used to be a three-part series in sponsorship. It's now turned into five. And basically, um, I'm gonna take you on a journey of through the book, um, how I take a person through the steps. I go through this, I wouldn't say I go quickly through the steps. I'm just not a line by line guy with sponsees. I think that there's too much time to do that. Um, I like, I take them through the steps because there's I've learned from sponsoring lots of men and anywhere from rehabs to detoxes to meetings, um, and being a counselor myself, that there's only a short window of opportunity to where the motivation ends. And some of these people, especially in rehabs, you're getting people that this might be their only chance. So I didn't all of a sudden change the way I sponsored. This is the way I was taking to the steps and the way I did it, and that's exactly the way he explained to me. Um, so I will use, basically bullet points for each step. I'm not gonna read every single paragraph I do, but I think you'll get the idea. Um, okay, so I mentioned this before, if I sponsor a guy to rehab, and I mean rehabs that actually let you hear their fifth step, which is far in between anymore. Um, but there's one of them that's still around, and I probably heard 200 steps there. Um, I just they're not going anywhere, so I can take them through the steps, but I like to get them to the fifth. Yeah, I got 30 days to get them to the fifth step, so I can take my time, and I can't go there every day. With the guy that's at the meetings, I they come up to me and they say, "Hey, can you sponsor me?" I say, I have a card. It says Steve Wood, had Big Book Will Travel on it, and it's got my phone number on it, and I've probably given out thousands of those cards. Maybe one out of every few hundred call me back. But when they do, you know, I just say read doc screen and call me back. Or if I don't give them a card, I just say, hey, here's my phone number, read doc screen and call me back. And that's my willingness test. Once I get that, I um I meet with them at a safe location, and I'll bring it to my house because you don't know people yet. And I start with the title page and explain that a little bit, and then I get right into the first step. And the thing about it is, with step one, the main thing we want the person to have at all times is a first step experience. And when I got here in 2000, that was a word you heard all the time, first step experience. And you don't hear it mentioned anymore as much, but it's vital to taking a person through this step. It's not like, are you alcoholic? Okay, boom, let's go to the next step. First step experience, can only come from knowing why we're powerless. And as you know, it says us to concede to ourselves we're alcoholic. The only way to know that and to fully concede is to know what an alcoholic is. And that's the breakdown of the allergy and the obsession, a fully breakdown of it. And that's through the book. If I sit there and talk to a guy and break down the allergy obsession off the top of my head, they're alcoholic. There's always gonna be a slight finger of doubt, like where's this guy pulling this stuff from? But when they see it in black and white, and it's been written like since 1939, there's a big trust factor there. I'm just an interpreter. And um, so I always start off on page 30. I will read this paragraph just so you can see how I explain it. So when I get a guy on step one, we go right to page 30, and it says most of us been unwilling to admit we're alcoholics. And I always tell them this bouncy underline real alcoholic. No person likes to think he's bodily and mentally different. underlying bodily and mentally different from their fellows. Um, it says, therefore, not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by counterfeit attempts to prove he could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control, I have him underlying control, and enjoy their drinking is a great obsession, underlying obsession of every abnormal drinker. Underlying abnormal. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing and may pursuits the gates of insanity and death. So I kind of mentioned those words: real alcoholic, bodily, mentally different, control, obsession, abnormal drinker, insanity, death. And I tell the person I'm working with, whether it be a man or a woman, I do sponsor women too. Um, I said, let's go on a journey to find what those words mean. On the journey to find what those words mean, we're going to have a first step experience. So I like look at the first word, real alcoholic. So we go to page 20. 20 to 22 is the three types of drinkers. And the way I explain it is I just let the book do the talking. Modern drinkers have little trouble giving liquor entirely. If they have a good reason for it, they can take it or leave it alone. So they have a normal reaction to alcohol. One or two drinks, they don't go any further. You know, it has human power. They have human aid. I asked the gentleman or woman, I say, you know, are you one of them? And they say no. And then there's a certain type of hard drinker. You may have the habit bowing up that gradually, um, impair him physically and mentally, and may cause him to die of fear for his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, a warning of a doctor becomes observed, this man can stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. So I always ask the person, are you one of them? And sometimes they say, well, I guess. And I say, well, did ill health stop you from drinking? Did falling in love stop you from drinking? And they're like, no. Change your environment. So I'm getting his mind going now. And I asked them, can you control your drinking? Because this person can. And they go, no, I can't. So I move on to, what about the real alcoholic? He may start as a moderate drinker. He may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his consumption once he starts to drink. So mental does not respond to reason, is what I say right there. I point that out, I explain to him. So I asked him, do you think you're one of them? Because a real alcoholic doesn't respond to reason. They're mentally different. Hold on. And get my phone. My daughter's texting me stuff. Sorry. The moderate drinker, I mean the hard drinker, um, the real alcoholic, that like does not respond to reason. I go, is that you? And then I ask him, can you control it? And I explained to him, this person has a reoccurring, persistent idea of drinking, doesn't respond to reason. The other ones respond to reason, right? I said, you do not. And I go, that's what an obsession is. You don't respond to reason. There's more to it, but I do a lot of talking with these guys on this because I want the first step experience. But now I got their attention. So this guy's already read doctor's opinion, so we're not going over the whole thing. So I have him go to XXVI, and I'm not going to read that whole paragraph. And it says, where it says, this is the diagnosis. Well, actually, I'll read it. It says, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, the action of alcohol in these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. Now I got their attention again. Craving is limited to this class, never occurs to the average drinker. So I explained to them that this craving is a powerful, uncontrollable desire for more. And I asked them, I always ask them questions like, do you know what a phenomenon is? Actually, I said, can you explain, like, once you put it in your body, you lose control. Can you, is that explainable to you? And he goes, I've always tried to figure it out. I said, so it's a phenomena, unexplainable phenomena of craving. And the abnormal reaction to alcohol. drugs, alcohol after the first drink, and that leads the separate craving for more. And that's what the phenomenal craving is. So this allergy is an abnormal reaction to a substance. And I did the same thing my sponsor did to me here. I said, define allergy. And they'll go, well, it's when you break out and this and that. I say, no, look it up. Abnormal reaction to a substance. And I got their attention again. So we're bodily mentally different from our fellows. We have abnormal reaction. This is where they start saying, this is me, this is me. And it says these allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, reliance upon things humans, their problem helping them, and it becomes staunchly difficult to solve. And I explained in that last sentence is, you know, that's unmanageability right there. I point out the unmanageability and I ask them is, um, if you are not in control of drinking, you know, or if you have no control, do you have any control picking up the first drink? And they go, no. You know, if you're not control the first drink, when you start, you're probably not one of them. And I say you're not in control of your life. So if you're not in control of the first drink, you're not in control of your life. Your life's gonna be unmanageable. That's the insanity of the first drink. And I also explained to them quite a bit of stuff here. I asked them, how successful you've been at managing your life, running your life, controlling your life. I got their attention again. I'm not going to read the paragraph. It's a few paragraphs down. It says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect. That's the cycle of drinking in there. But I want to go to the end of that paragraph and show you how I wrap that paragraph up. And it says this is repeated over and over again. So the bottom of that page, unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. And I explain what entire means, complete, and I explained to them, I asked them questions like, have you ever felt like you had a change in your life or a psychic change, a mind change? And they go, yeah, on certain things I changed the way I look at stuff. I said, how about a complete? And they go, no. And one guy said to me years ago, I thought that happened when I went to church, but I couldn't figure a way for it to happen again. And so I explained to them, this is an entire psychic change. This is about a mind change of everything. And I go to from there, I'm going to go to page 21. I'm not going to read this whole paragraph on 21, but that's the Jekyll and Hyde paragraph. So if you want to mark that as one of the ones I cover, if you want, I read that whole paragraph, and here's the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially his lack of control. So we go through that paragraph, and that's what really gets them. And what I do next after I read that paragraph is I give them the definition of all those words we covered: real alcoholic, body mentally different, control, obsession. I'm really hammering it home. And death, the cycle of drinking. That's what that is. And I conclude step one on the second paragraph on page 30. And this is the essential requirement for completing step one. It says we learn to fully concede our normal selves that that we were alcoholics. This is the first step of recovery, the illusion that we're like other people presently may be hastily smashed. And I explained to them, I asked them what concede means, and I have them look it up, and a lot of times they'll see it means surrender, which means to stop fighting, admit defeat. And I explained what innermost means, the deepest part of a being. I'm actually starting to plant seeds for step two a little bit. But I say they're asking you to fully surrender in your innermost selves that we're alcoholic. In order to do that, we must know what an alcoholic is, and we review it again a little bit what we went over. And I asked them, to look and I have them sit for a minute and get quiet. And I asked them, now if I'm in Starbucks, I'll have them do that, but I'll walk away and go order a coffee or something. Give them a few minutes. And when I come back after they're thinking about that surrender, I ask them a couple other questions. I say, do you relate to the allergy obsession from actual experience? And they go, I do. So I'm kind of re-asking questions I asked as I was going through. Do you believe your hope was conditioned? Do you believe human power has failed you? Those questions like that. Do you believe your powers over alcohol, drugs, whatever it is? Do you believe life's unmanageable? And a lot of times I think I'm just going to say you done step one, but I said, do you fully concede your innermost self? Well, fully surrender your innermost self, you're alcoholic. Boom. Excel and completed step one. What I do then is I set the date for step two, but nowadays more it depends if the guy is not getting it, step one takes over 45 minutes, so an hour and a half, then I don't want to overwhelm him. But sometimes I can go right into step two because I don't spend a lot of time in step two with the person. Um, I can hit the main points because I like to get to know like what their belief systems are a little bit, or if they have any at all. I usually do that in a conversation even before step one, but I also let them kind of tell themselves a little bit. Like when they start asking questions, like, I don't know if I can do this because of the belief systems involved, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. But um, with step two, I start on page 44 and I read all the way to 45. So I'm not going to read all 44, but because we'd be here all night, but I read to 45 and I read the part on 45, and this is the big part for step two for me, is lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find our power, which we could live, and how to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously, but where and how do we find this power? And that's the location and method. Now, those of you who attended this book study before know that this is exactly what I cover it in this book, the book study. And so now we're looking at location and method. Where do we find the power? And how we find the power. So for how we find the power, I'm not going to read the paragraph, but we go to page 25, right? Where it says there's a solution, not you may just like this, the self-searching, leveling of pride and all that. And I explained to them as we read each one, um, you know, I ask them questions like, you know what step that is? And then I point out 4 through 9. Now we read that paragraph, it shows every single 4 through 9 is one of 4 through 9 is in there. So how we find the power is 4 through 9. And then now I got the guy's attention again. And but the real whole setup of this is that really creates the second step experience, so to speak, which I don't use that word a lot with the guy, but the page 55. And I explain a little bit about my upbringing to the person, my religious upbringing, um, what it was like in my house growing up, but not to bash religion at all, because I don't know who I'm dealing with yet. I read the whole page, um, and I start off on the second paragraph, actually forming ourselves, we down may remember when child is a final idea of God, and like break down those words, what that means, and kind of sometimes they'll ask questions. Um, but then this is the part where it says the next paragraph, it says, we finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as feelings for a friend. And I do the same thing my sponsor asked me here. What do you look for in a friend? And sometimes I got to fish it a little bit. And I get them to asking, well, what do you look for in a ride or die friend? Someone that has my back, someone that's always trusts me, someone that doesn't judge me, someone that's there no matter what. This, and this. I go, have you found that friend yet? And they go, well, most 80% of that stuff in there I found. Not every, and I go, right, you're not gonna find that in a person, but just get there might be something out there that has all those qualities. And have them write all this down. And they don't know they're writing down God's will, it's what they're writing down. But then we keep reading. We found in the most powerful paragraph here is we found the great reality deep down within us. And last house is only there when we found it, so with us. Now, I asked them, why is great reality capitalized? And they'll go, oh, God. So we found God deep down within. And this is a big effect on people. Some people are speechless. Some people will go, oh, yeah, I've always known that. And I know they're full of it, because I explained how I thought God was up here in the clouds, and it's a very simple aspect. And I read the rest of the paragraph. And then what I like to do is we don't have to go to that page, but I read the bedevilments to them because I want them to be taken back to what they've gone through, what they put people through and everything. And from the developments, I go to page 53. And what I'm doing here is I'm loosely setting up step 3, but it says when we became toward the bottom, when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, and I realized self-imposed. It wasn't your upbringing, it wasn't this, it wasn't that. It's not God's fault. We could not postpone or evade. We had to fiercely face the proposition either God's everything or else he's nothing. God either is or he isn't. What are our choice to be? What I love about this paragraph is I could I've taken hundreds, I've taken more people through the first 3 steps than I've heard 5th steps. I think we're all like that a little bit. But with this paragraph, I would say every single time I read to someone, there's a different dialogue that goes with it. And because I'm getting to know the person now. And I ask, are you willing to make the choice that God's everything or else he's nothing? So I'm kind of planting the seeds. And I go right to 47 and middle of that page. And we need to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe or I'm willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say he does believe or is willing to believe, we in fact we show him he is on his way. And I ask him the questions. I ask him, are you open-minded about finding a power greater than yourself? Are you willing to take the action needed to find that power? Do you believe or willing to believe in power greater than yourself? And I repeat what it says around the book. As soon as a person can say they believe or willing to believe, in fact, we show them his way. I said, you completed step 2. Now, that might seem like a 10-minute process we just did, but it's not. We're talking anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours going through step 2 like that because there's so much information, there's so much conversation going through there. But I let the book do the talking, especially page 55. A lot of information that goes with it. Sometimes I can go right into step 3 with the guy. Sometimes I'll do 2 and 3 together, but usually for the last 7 or 8 years, I've done step 3 separate. And so so let's say I've done step 2, I set the date to do step 3. Usually I like to do it in the next day or the day after. You know, I don't like to do it like a week later because a lot can happen. And if they sometimes you have to kind of go with the vibe. I can tell when the desperation there. So, but step 3, I start with the ABCs on page 60. We don't have to go there. I'm just gonna tell you kind of like, but I'm not gonna read all of it. But what I do is I make the ABCs and the questions. Are you convinced? You're alcoholic. You're not manage your own life. Are you convinced that probably no human power can relieve your alcoholism? Are you convinced that God could have would if you were saw it? And I explain it to them. And that's the C is kind of a stump. That's where I get more information about what the higher power is like or their idea of it. Um, I keep going on page 16, being convinced we're at step 3, which is decide to turn or will life or care God to understood him. I explain to them what a decision is. There's a pre-thought plan prior to action. A lot of information I hand to them, and I like to find out too if a guy's how many 3rd steps they've done before. And because sometimes guys will say, "Oh, I've done a bunch of these." I said, "What is you?" But you never did the 4th step, so you never went past it. You never really did it. And now I got their attention again. But it's the first required to be convinced that any life around self-work or how to be a success. I start bringing in the instincts to them, the pride, the self-esteem. I explain to them all those instincts that we see in the 4th column of the inventory, but they don't know yet. I'm explaining what self-will is. Um, I read the actor because it closes right through that and the more self-will instinct stuff. And I just cruise it through 62 and I explain the root of our troubles. I explain whole page, about quit playing God and all that stuff, you know. Um, and we go I love doing the 3rd step promises with them. And when we're done with the 3rd step promises, I read the sentence at the end. One thing about 3rd step promise, I explained, you're going to see more of these as we go through this. So it's kind of cool. And before we read the 3rd step prayer, do the 3rd step prayer, I read the paragraph out sentence afterwards. We thought well before taking the step, making sure we were ready. We could last the viruses out to him. And here's where I talk about giving up control, not to God, but giving up control, and talk a lot about control and what control is. But before doing the third step prayer, I go over and I go to 64 and I read I call the third step warning. I don't tell them that. I said, let's read what it says on 64. We go over there and it's the top of that page. Though our decision, step three, is it was a vital, crucial step to have little or permanent effect unless at once followed by strenuous to effort would be step four, to face step five, and get rid of 6 and 7, the things in ourselves that have been blocking us. And I get into blocking. I said, I go, you never were separated from God. You've been blocked. Now I got their attention again. This can be, that paragraph can turn into a 30-minute conversation on its own or more. Like I said, I want them, just like a first step experience, third step experience is very important here. And I'm very much old school on this one. If I'm at a book study and a sponsee is doing a third step prayer the first time, when the book study is over that night, we'll do it as a group. Um, Sometimes at the rehab there's a chapel. Sometimes we get 40 people up in the chapel, and each person will do the third step prayer, and the guy goes last, and the last person is still sitting there. But sometimes this is where it's tough because it might look weird in Starbucks dropping to our knees and doing a third step prayer. So I have places we can go to. Sometimes it's outside. Sometimes it's like if I'm cool with them by that time, we'll go in my garage. And I drop to my knees and I do the prayer first, and usually they follow suit. I don't force them to do anything like that. Um, but it's so many amazing experiences happen. And I'm sure all of us have stories when we first did the third step prayer for real. And the other thing I tell them is I want them to start saying this prayer every morning and every night at the same time. So every upon awakening and before going to bed. I'm trying to get their they don't know it, but I want them to have this prayer memorized by the time we do step 4. And I mean by the time we do step 5. And they usually do. And basically I want them to memorize that prayer. And it's important to have it memorized because I bring it a lot into everything. And also, the reason I'm having doing it in the morning and at night is I'm getting those times ready for step 11. There's easy transition and same place and time. And I give them now. I give them after we did the third step prayer. One thing I give them the 4 step packet I have, and you've seen it before. And I explain resentments and all that stuff through there, and um and I have them write down a resentment, maybe 2 of them. And I show them, now here's the boxes, check the boxes. And do you think it's this? It's the only time I ever do that. And then it gets done. I said, now is that difficult? And they say, no, not really. I said, well, you just turn your life over to care of God. That's how you did that. So it's a pen to paper. I say, I want you to go home and fill all the rest of this page tonight and try to do one every day, or as much as you can. And also I explained to them, I want you to fill these out in the morning, at night, at least 2 of them, and then during the day. Um, Now, the thing I like to meet with them, you know, maybe 2 days later and show them, explain to them step 4 more, explain to them, go to the book, read 64 through 67, how to write inventory, fear, 60, 67, 68, and then sex 70 or 68 to 70. And I really, you know, push them to work on the 4 step, like I said in the morning, to write a couple down every day. We at the end of this one, we set a date, do step 5. So it's only been 2 days or 1 day since they got in their force, and sometimes we do all this, what we just went over, right after I give them the 4 step packet, so it's a really long session. But, I said date, do step 5. Um, what's important is I don't want to be threatening with that date. I don't say, oh, that's today's the 3rd, you got to be done with this by the 6th. And if not, you're fired. No, I don't do I never fired a sponsee for that, but I usually, I like to, give them, no more than 5 or 6 days to work on a lot until I start pushing them a little bit, and usually I can get them done within, I mean, for me, a couple weeks is long. Um, but I never had to threaten to fire someone. I've had guys just disappear and, I'm blocked from their phone. I usually don't call them. I text them and just say, "Hey, I haven't heard from you," and I get the drift. You know. As far as the hearing the fifth step goes, um, a lot of them have been heard right in this office. A lot of them are heard that there's um a monastery not far from me that they let us go do fifth steps at, which is really cool. They have a little chapel room. There's another person who lives up in the hills that has a bunch of little rooms smaller than this. I like it to be. I like them to understand this is a sacred thing we're doing. I don't necessarily use those words, but I wanted to make it as special as I can. Um, and before we start, I go to 75 and I read on 75 and we decide who's here a story waste of time. We've written an inventory and prepared for a long talk and explaining what a long talk's probably gonna look like. And it says we explained to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. So this is when I explain to them what we're about to do. I go to 72. So I go back a little bit, and they haven't read this yet. And it says maybe they've read it on their own, but and what we're about to do is we're trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our creator and discover the obstacles in our path. And I explain to them what attitude is. And I go through the book where different attitudes are mentioned. I don't like to spend too much time on this because we got a fifth step. We got a long day. I like to spend like maybe 15 minutes on this opening part. And I like to really, you know, that we must discover the obstacles in our path and I explain what those obstacles look like you know, and how obstacles stand between you and progress. If you want freedom, the obstacles must be removed type stuff. And I explain to them that our path is the steps. So the obstacles stand between you and God. And I try to be vague here as much as I can. I'm not doing a book study with them. I'm setting the pieces up for step 5, and I'm getting to know, bringing up God and into it. And then it says why do we have to do it? That's awesome. 73. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome our drinking. And I read the rest of that paragraph where newcomers have kept certain facts to themselves. I don't tell them you better not do this. I let the book sink it in, and I tell them I've known people this has happened to, but I don't and from there we read back at 75 is he should realize we're engaged in a life and death errand, and I said this is life and death, and that's all I say. I don't explain it. I don't want to scare them. And most people approach this lady will be glad to help. They're honored by confidence. I look the person right in the eyes right here and I tell them it's an honor to hear your fifth step. I want to tell you it's a true honor. But I want you to make a promise to me that if I hear this one, you're going to hear someone else's. And it's a very powerful moment there. The average fifth step I hear, I don't say, okay, I heard enough resentments and skip. I hear all their fears, all their resentments, all their harms, all their sex conduct. I've had some that have gone 10 hours. I've had some that have gone 13 hours, but at an average, I would say between 4 and 6. The shorter ones might go 3. Sometimes they're 2. There's no wrong fist up as long as they do it. Um, but you got to remember, some of these guys I sponsored have been to prison. Some of these guys have, done deep stuff. And I'm not going to hear, oh, give me your top 5 worst harms you ever did. Because one thing I learned about guys that have been to prison is they're scared. They've never told anyone the things they've ever done, all they've ever done, and they've been taught you can't. So if they'll tell me a few, but then they'll tell me this crazy ones right off bat. Well, let me tell you a couple crazy ones, and then we're almost done with the fifth step, and then they go, "We got done sex." Oh yeah, well, I need to tell you something, and they go back to it again. I wouldn't want to shortchange those guys out of that, you know, and I don't want to change their plan by leaving stuff out or filling out the boxes for them or explaining. I have them read it back like right in front of them. But I conclude the fifth step um on page 75, where it says we can look the world in the eye, and I read those promises, and I read it very slowly. I don't say anything except um we can be alone in perfect peace and ease. All I tell them is you can be by yourself and never be alone ever again. And I explain the hour after that. And I do it the way that I was taken through the steps, and it's all in one day. And the hour is I ask them the questions in there, I set them up for it, and I have them bring those questions into the hour. And I said, just keep going into step 6 and 7. And they say, conclude it with the 7 step prayer. And they do their hour. And what I suggest for them, if they're gonna go home, like I always ask them, who do you live with? Oh, I live with my wife. I said, well, who's your first amends gonna be? I get guys that's 2 weeks later, I haven't met amends or yet, or my kids, or I suggest them to make amends to the first people they see. And I explain to them how to make an amends. Um, I also explain that, now do inventory. If you want to write something down on the inventory, you can. Like you can write down a resentment or any fears you have. And we meet usually the next day. And I like meeting them in the afternoon because I say, okay, well, I want you to make some amends. And they come back and I say, so how's your amends coming along? And they tell me 3 or 4 of them. Then we write out the official amends list. We go through and we write down, the unwilling, the willing, the ones I can't make right now, those type of things, the creditors, and then the ones that cannot be seen. And I explain to them how I did that. And, you know, from there on, when we meet, it's vitally important that they're always going to have to bring that 8 step list because I'm going to ask them about it. You know, it's always important, to open everything with prayer. And then what I do is, as an excuse, I have them, I'll kind of stretch it out a little bit, give them a little bit of time, like a week. And when we meet from here on, we're going to meet on the same day each week for as long as I feel we suit it. And we'll meet a week later and I'll start going through this and really explain to them out of the book, 83 to 84, I mean 78, the creditor, all that. I kind of explain all that already when I explain it to them. And then we'll meet the next a week after that, maybe sooner, to go over 10, 11. But I try to meet in the same day. And there's a reason behind that. It's all tied up to sponsorship. And um when we go over, 10 and 11, I take them straight through, I read step 84 to 85. I give them a 8 step packet or a 10 step packet I have, and it just almost looks like the other one. There's 11 step checks they can check off, like a calendar type thing. Uh, Stuff that I've seen other people do too. I've you know asked if I could use it to give my sponsees. It's great. I do all that stuff like that, and that's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's great. And but I go with 24-hour plan and I get them into that. Um, I suggest that they really want to get into meditation and watch some YouTube videos and stuff on meditation, start, focusing on it. But I don't shove it down their throats, but I say sit in silence for 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes at night, and then go these questions. And I bring up to 5 and I get them eventually, hopefully, into 10 minutes. And when I get them on these things and they're doing step 10, they're doing 11, now it starts to shift because now I'm gonna set a date to meet to go over the 12th step. And this is kind of, so when we meet now, I ask them about right away, how's your amends coming along? What amends did you make this week? Why not? Or how did it go? Either way. Um, if he says none, you better explain it. And I'm not, I just ask, the way I usually answer them, I say, why, how come you haven't made any like that? And I don't want it to sound like anything to push them away. But I asked them, "Did you have any 10-step stuff that you've written down this week? Let's go over it. How's your 11 step coming along?" So what I do is we go over the title page like we did the last few weeks in here, all through the book and hit the bullet points on sponsoring and go through working with others. And the thing is the next week we'll meet again. And now it's going to be different. This is the way I work with my sponsees now who've been around for a while. We don't meet every week, sometimes every other week, sometimes once a month, but we open up with prayer. Sometimes we'll read a devotional, maybe even meditate. But I ask them, "Do you have any 10-step inventory, you know, from over the last week?" Sometimes they'll call me up during the week and say, "Hey, they're really going through something." They call me up and go, "I need to go over this with you. How's your amends list looking? How's your 11 step coming along?" Guys I sponsored for years. Um, Sometimes I just, when they're struggling with something, they say, "Are you meditating?" No. And they're really strong. Or I say, "How's your 11 step?" "I haven't been meditating." And I ask them how always ask them, how do you think you're doing right now? And I leave it at that. I don't ever tell them they're doing bad. But I like to read a quote from the book, and sometimes we discuss it a little bit. And we'll do that for once a week for maybe 3 weeks or so. But anywhere in between that, after he's made a handful of amends and I feel like he's doing well on 10, I suggest he start raising his hand for sponsorship. And that's pretty deep right there. I mean, that's just the way it's done. We don't wait a year. I want to get him there quickly. And you know, and I take him to places I go to, the rehabs and stuff, and raise your hand. These guys will like you. There's 70 guys in the room, and it gives them the confidence. They go to meetings. I take them to meetings. I go to where they can find. Um, people think that I've added more to what we do. I've actually, taken stuff out. The way I sponsor guys, and such as going. I like I don't like to go slow on step one. You know, but we're dealing with death and awakening. That's the way I look at it. And to get them to the steps, they have a lifetime of growth and awakening to learn this book and to go line by line. And I offer them, you want to go line by line through this book once you start sponsoring, sure, right? Do all my sponsees sponsor? They say they do, but do they all? No. But again, I'm just happy to be there for them when they need me. Do they all do inventory when I wish they would? No. Um, and the first 3 years are the most crucial meeting with them on 10-step stuff because now they're in the real world. Now they got this new spiritual awakening. Fears are going to develop. They're going to have, stuff. They're going to have maybe divorces, maybe breakups, maybe loss of jobs. And if they're writing down the little things, the little fears, when the big ones happen, it won't hurt them as bad. They'll be able to figure it out. And I had a sponsor ask me recently, and he's got about 5 years. He goes, when do I stop writing stuff down? I said, I still write stuff down, but I said, your awareness grows and you can figure it out. You can figure it out real easy. Um, if I didn't do the steps this way I broke down here tonight, I can honestly tell you I wouldn't be here. I most likely would be dead. Because I'd been to rehab 7 times and in out of recovery, and I was at, I just to get out of bed in the morning, I had to have a drink. Just to wake to fall asleep, I had to take pills. And then to keep drinking, I had to do more drugs. And I was as, I was bleeding out my nose, ears, and mouth, basically. But, you know, when I got a rehab, I did 45 days of the last rehab I went to. It's typical rehab, nothing special about it. I'd heard all before. But I hid for 2 weeks after I got a rehab. And I hid for 2 weeks because I knew I had to do the steps. I didn't know where I'd find someone, and also I was afraid of the people that I used to run with. A lot of them, when they were using, they just wanted someone to use with. I didn't want to see them, and I also had people I was afraid to see because of things I had done. That's why I hid. But when I quit hiding, I had 60 days. And I started going to meetings. And for about, 2 weeks sitting on my hands, I was in my car one day and I was like, I'm doing it again. I'm just sitting at meetings doing nothing because I would never get more than 90 days or get past the third step prayer, either one. If I could do the third step prayer in a month, I would start getting loaded again. And I was, I admit it this time. Started going to book studies. The last time I was sober for the 30 days I was sober, I knew they were there. I'd been around long enough to know there's people that talk funny about the steps. Um, but I was about 2 weeks away from my usual 90-day relapse, and I got really scared. And what happened was I was living with a guy who had relapsed, and we go way back. And I had a feeling he was smoking dope again and stuff. And it was raining outside, and he comes to my room and he goes, "Hey, you going to your group tonight?" And I said, "No, it's raining." And he hands me an umbrella and he goes, "Don't make the same mistake I did." And I walked to that meeting, like sounds like an old parent story. I walked 2 miles to that meeting in the rain. The umbrella blew off, got hit by a car. But I walked in that meeting and I found the happiest guy in the room and asked him to sponsor me. I had about 75 days sober at that time. And this guy was a big book sponsor. He wasted no time. We met the next day. We did 1 and 2. A few days later, we did a third step prayer. Started my 4 step, about a week later, and I did 5, 6, and 7, and was making amends the same day. Um, the entire process of that took about 2 weeks. But after making, a handful of amends, like the same way I do my sponsees, um, I had no idea that. I met my grand sponsor at a meeting and he goes, "How many amends you made?" And I said, "About seven." And he goes, "Oh, cool. You're going with me to Salvation Army this weekend." Okay, you can sponsor now. And I was, of course, dedicated 10 and 11. That's when I started sponsoring. And I heard my first fifth step at 4 months sober. And I knew if it took longer, I mean, again, I'd probably be dead. But I had an experience in 6 and 7 that changed every fathom of my being. I was ridiculed by old timers at meetings who said, what the F would you know at 4 months?" And people like my grand sponsor told me, don't listen to them. Just do it out of the book. Take them to the steps. And I remember checking into a clean service I was supposed to move into it 6 months. And they said, "Do you have a sponsor?" I said, "Yes." And I said, "Yeah, I sponsor others." And they said, "Oh, you can't live here then. You have to have 2 years to sponsor. You can live here, but you have to have 2 years to sponsor." And I was like, I looked at them. I said, "Well, I guess I can't live here then." And I went and lived with a friend of mine, and who was a normie. And I never looked back. It used to be very you know, outspoken about the steps in my first 7 years. And I mellowed after about 7 years. And I, kept doing, because I kept doing the steps, and the more God I felt and the more God experiences I had, I got, the more I sponsored, the more I felt closer to God, and the more I saw, I can always do things better. And the more my life is centered on, you and not me. It's all about being altruistic, and the practice, that's just concern for the well-being of others. And, you know, ma- m- you know, as far as the altruism goes, and this is, I get emotional because so many people in recovery never experienced that. And I buried a lot of people, you know, that just didn't want to do it. And, people don't sponsor for a year or longer, so they're not going to do it. And from a medical standpoint, altruism does not seem like an appropriate treatment for alcoholism or addiction. That's, but it's the truth. For this program to be effective, it requires us to take others through this process. It's a requirement. It's about freely giving yourself to another person without a comprehension of anything in return. And it wakens up to, I always say, love, compassion, and passion for life. And the spirit of love and altruism is something we must carry with us to all people. And that's the newcomer in recovery, to the homeless person, to the grocery store clerk, to the guy that cut me off on the road, to our back to our homes, practicing and demonstrating these principles in all our affairs. Before we do the steps, you think about it, and I see this in people I sponsor. It's all about us, me, I. You know, we didn't come to AA so we could make it I, not me anymore, or find out being unselfish. We were there because we couldn't stop drinking. We had no idea that it would take us through that journey. We were, I had no idea of helping others in my life. Rarely I thought about helping others. I want people to serve me. And, we complained how poorly life was treating us when we got here. That self-centered, victim, fearful, angry mindset is what, made me drink a lot more. Unfortunately, a lot of people drink for that reason, but if you have an allergy, it's not doesn't end well. And I'll be honest with you, 100%. When I first walked into AA when I was 22, I got sober at 30, 31. I thought those people who taught program were just do-gooders. The people that had the spiritual awakenings, and all you guys like that. I was thinking you're all good do-gooders. You were like that when you got here. You were a good person when you got here, because I couldn't fathom it. See, I had to tear it apart. You know, I thought the real people in recovery were the ones who struggled with it and were the relapsers, and that sounds insane. But when I saw in those do-gooders what I didn't have, and so I got one of those do-gooders as sponsorman, and here I am. I learned that, I never forget when my friend Kyle told me. He passed away a few years ago from alcoholism, but he came around right at the perfect time when we both got sober together. I looked at him at side of I think it was a Starbucks, and we both knew we were sober, and we used to do everything together as far as using goes, and then everything together in recovery. And he relapsed and died. Just couldn't stop doing 10, 11, 12. And but one thing he did was introduce me to the book. And the one thing he told me, he said, service is everything. And what are, the one thing I look at it is, what a better help than taking another through this process. There's no special training required to be a sponsor. People say, oh, I can't sponsor. I don't know as much as you do. There's no special requirement. There's no diploma. Just a spiritual awakenings with all these steps. You don't need any special abilities or talents or anything like that. Just a spiritual awakening. And to use the book, we give it away. All we are is recovered alcoholics who want to do this to save our ass. And the core of our program and the backbone of the program is always one alcohol helping another. That's how it all started. That's what was built upon. I mean, AA could never refund me from what they've given me. That's why I say it's priceless. That can never be refunded. So next week, and this is only the third time it's happened in the 20 plus years I've been doing book studies, is a friend of mine used to do this thing called the Christmas tree. And it shows you what is recovery and what's not recovery. And I'm going to show you all the promises in the book over the next couple weeks. So that's what we'll be looking at. It's be a lot. It'll be amazing, but I say it's the only time it's ever happened where we're this close to Christmas, which is exciting. The Christmas trees are up. So anyways, I'm going to stop the recording and